Amidst the chatter of a crowded room, Lady Turos suddenly feels faint and collapses, but a young man with brown hair swiftly catches her in his arms. As someone calls out her name in alarm, she lies unconscious while the young man who caught her looks down with a worried expression. Suddenly, Taieraros' mind is flooded with strange voices and memories from a past life where she was a young woman in a different world. She remembers being an avid player of a popular otome game, excitedly getting a new release and celebrating the completion of a character route for a charming blonde man named Heart Knights. With a joyful expression, Taieraros realizes she has been reborn into the world of that very game, Ring of Lapis Lazuli, a story set in a kingdom of the same name. This was a game she deeply loved in her previous life, featuring a cast of handsome characters within an ornate, jewel-like setting. Unfortunately, she recalls that her reincarnation was not as the game's heroine, but as the rival character, the villainous Taieraros Lapis Clementil, who is the prince's fiancée. She remembers that the game's plot involves a transfer student, the heroine, whose powerful charms win everyone over, and now Taieraros is living out the villainess's story instead of a happy ending. She looks over and sees the lovely, dark-haired heroine named Akari standing beside the blonde prince, realizing with dread that it's far too late to change her fate. Taieraros panics internally, knowing that today is the day before the graduation party, which is the setting for the villainess's condemnation and bad end where the prince publicly breaks their engagement. Waking up, Taieraros finds herself in what appears to be the infirmary, feeling awful about her situation. A voice tells her to stay in bed and that a carriage is being arranged, and as she looks up, her heart pounds seeing Prince Heart Knights, the very character she used to control in the game, standing before her. Prince Heart Knights comments coldly that it's a first for her to collapse, questioning if she did it to get his attention since he has been spending so much time with Akari. Taieraros is stunned by his words, realizing the prince standing before her is cruel and completely different from the kind and loving character in the game she married. As he stands there looking down on her, she can't believe he's the same person she once adored, and his coldness is frightening. Lying in bed, she tells him it's nothing and that she just isn't feeling well, thanking him for his trouble while he smiles condescendingly, reminding her that he is her fiancé. Taieraros thinks about how it's no use, as the prince is already being won over by the heroine, Akari, and the game's route is complete. She then has a sudden realization, noting that Akari's name sounds Japanese, which is unusual for this world, and wonders if the heroine could also be someone who was reborn. The game itself never allowed players to name the heroine, which further fuels her suspicion that Akari might be just like her before she is interrupted by a cough. Prince Heart Knights then informs her that another engagement has come up, so he will be unable to escort her to the party tomorrow. Taieraros looks at his cold eyes and understands she must go to the party alone, a party her own fiancé will not take her to. He seems surprised at how quickly she agrees, thinking to himself that it's going to be humiliating for her. Taieraros calmly smiles and says it is not her place to stand in his way, even though she thinks he should be ashamed as a crown prince for not accompanying his fiancée. She recalls how in the past she would have warned him against such shameful behavior, but now things are different. He gets up to leave, stating that her agreement saves him trouble and that tomorrow's ending is already set, while her pleas no longer reach him. As he walks out the door, she quietly thanks him for his concern, and he departs, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Left alone in the silent room, Taieraros sighs, knowing that if tomorrow follows the game's scenario, Prince Heart Knights and Akari will be waiting for her when she arrives at the party. She thinks about how she will be condemned for her nagging behavior, which was really just her trying to prevent the prince from being stolen by the heroine. She recalls a memory from an evening party where she told the heroine that she shouldn't dance with a man who isn't her fiancé more than twice. She also remembers warning the heroine against touching a man who already has a fiancé, which were just the rules of their society. Taieraros believes her words may have been harsh, but as the daughter of a duke, it was her duty to give warnings to the daughter of a mere earl. Growing up, she was educated to become a queen, and her father, the prime minister, had told her that if her husband strays down the wrong path, it is her duty to correct him. She was also taught that as royalty, they were not to engage in thoughtless behavior or be observed casually by those of lower status, which is why she had tried to stop Sir Heart Knights from carelessly going into town. She knows that she acted as a proper fiancé, and her harsh words were her way of showing her love for him, but it seems he never understood her intentions. Taieraros shakes her head, deciding that perhaps she just shouldn't go to the graduation party at all, but then dismisses the idea, knowing it would be improper for the daughter of a duke not to attend. She thinks of her kind parents and knows she cannot live with causing them trouble, prompting her to wonder what happened to the villainess in the game after she was condemned. She then remembers seeing in the game's credits that Lady Tiaros was banished from the kingdom, and she feels a sense of relief knowing that at least it isn't a death sentence. A smile graces her lips as she imagines a happy future for herself, possibly falling in love and living as a commoner. After all, she was a commoner in her past life, so she feels confident she will be alright, and it would be better than a miserable future married to the prince. She thinks that the Heart Knights she loved was the game character, a different person from the man who now exists, and wonders what will happen tomorrow. Just as she is leaving the infirmary, with her carriage having arrived, the story rewinds a little. In another part of the school, a handsome young man with dark hair, identified as Aquastede Marinforest, the crown prince of a neighboring kingdom, watches from a distance. He thinks about how Tiaros is within his reach, yet he hesitates to approach her. The scene replays to when Tiaros wobbles on her feet, feeling dizzy and distressed in the crowded hall. As she staggers and begins to fall, others cry out her name in shock. It is Prince Aquastede who rushes forward and catches her before she hits the ground, holding her gently in his arms. He swiftly lifts her up and announces he is taking her to the infirmary, all while wondering what could have happened to cause a healthy and strong-willed girl like her to suddenly collapse. As he carries her, he reflects on the immense pressure she is constantly under as the fiancée of the crown prince. He considers that the cause of her collapse might be the female transfer student, Akari, who has been very intimate with Prince Heart Knights. The situation has escalated to the point where rumors are spreading that Heart Knights might cast Tiaros aside to marry Akari instead. Aquastede thinks to himself that if that were to happen, then there would be nothing standing in the way of him proposing to Tiaros himself. He arrives at the infirmary and gently lays her down on the bed, knowing that if the crown prince of a larger kingdom like his desired it, preparations for a proposal could be completed swiftly. For the first time, he allows himself to touch his beloved, his hand hovering over hers as he prepares to leave. He knows his own student life will end with graduation tomorrow, and with a shake of his head, he steps away, believing his own feelings will eventually settle down. Lady Tiaros sighs in her lavish room, contemplating how she was reborn into a game world as the Villainess, and a day has passed since she regained her past life's memories. Today marks the graduation party, which is also the climactic ending of the game. Her lady-in-waiting Philin Sunfist suggests that Tiaros ask her father to escort her to the party since she lacks an escort, but Tiaros declines the offer. She explains that her father will be busy performing his duties as counselor because the king will also be in attendance, and she does not wish to be a bother to him. Tiaros thinks about the custom of asking a relative for an escort when one is without a partner, but feels that arriving at the party all by herself would be rather awkward. Tiaros then imagines her father, whom she describes as a serious helicopter parent, having a complete fit of rage, which is a comical image of him surrounded by flames. Seeing her mistress looking distressed, Philin gently squeezes Tiaros' hands and offers her unwavering support, telling her that she can always confide in her humble servant if anything is troubling her. Tiaros smiles warmly at Philin and thanks her for her kindness, saying that just having Philin on her side is more than enough for her. As her thoughts drift, she reflects on how the graduation party, which is actually the Villainess's condemnation event, will soon begin. Just then Philin cheerfully announces that she has prepared some treats to lift her spirits. While Philin pours some tea, Tiaros muses about her deep love for sweets, a passion that is carried over from her previous life, and how they have always managed to make things better even in difficult times. At the same time, Philin quietly fumes to herself about Prince Heart Knights not escorting Lady Tiaros, and she is determined not to forgive him for it while a knock sounds at the door. Tiaros tells Philin to answer the door, wondering if it might be a message from her professor or someone else. While Philin is gone, Tiaros takes a moment to enjoy a delicious sweet, closing her eyes in bliss as she savors the taste, but her peaceful moment is shattered when someone loudly calls out her name, causing her to jolt in surprise. Lady Akari, the game's heroine, bursts into the room with a worried expression, asking Tiaros if she is feeling okay. Philin is taken aback by her sudden and improper entrance, while Tiaros gracefully composes herself to greet Lady Akari, thanking her for her concern. Akari smiles back kindly and greets her in return. Akari explains that she has been worried ever since Tiaros collapsed in the classroom the day before, and Tiaros silently observes Akari's cute and luxurious dress, thinking that she looks as pretty as an angel, just as one would expect from the game's heroine. Akari then mentions that Sir Heart Knights has also been very worried, which Tiaros finds strange considering he is her fiancé and his concern should be a given. Prince Heart Knights himself then appears, walking into the room behind Akari, and Tiaros, who had been thinking about how he claimed he couldn't escort her, greets him with a formal curtsy. He explains that he came because Akari was worried about her and asks if she feels well enough to attend the graduation party tonight, while Tiara Rose internally notes that he brought another woman to her room so close to the party's start. Akari happily exclaims that it's a relief to see Lady Tiara Rose is feeling okay and looks to Sir Heartknights for agreement, which makes Tiara Rose inwardly fume at them acting like a couple. Tiara Rose assures them that she rested well and will have no problem attending the party, all the while thinking that he seems to have plenty of free time despite claiming his circumstances kept him busy. Feeling the pressure of time, Tiara Rose asks Philin how long it will take to finish getting ready, and Philin, realizing they are running late, insists they must start her preparations immediately or they won't be ready in time. Overhearing their conversation, Heartknights acknowledges that they came at a bad time and says that he and Akari will excuse themselves. Once the door slams shut behind them, Philin erupts in anger, ranting about how Prince Heartknights and Lady Akari were wearing a matching tie and ribbon made of the same color and cloth. She points out that this is incredibly disrespectful for Akari to do in front of the prince's actual fiancée, and Tiara Rose calmly reflects that this must be part of their plan for the condemnation event. Philin continues to rage, questioning why His Majesty doesn't admonish Akari for her disrespectful behavior towards the royal house. She declares that she cannot bear the thought of her precious Lady Tiara Rose marrying such a man and boldly suggests that she should just break off the engagement. Tiara Rose smiles lightly, finding Philin's suggestion amusing, and agrees that the prince will likely break it off himself. Tiara Rose is happy that Philin agrees with her and thinks about what she can do to please her loyal servant. Philin, for her part, seems to understand that Tiara Rose doesn't want the engagement either and resolves to do her best to help, but she also gently asks her mistress not to overdo it. Later, Tiara Rose stands before the grand doors of the ballroom ready for the party, and she recalls how in the game she was the last to enter, an outcome she had hoped to avoid, but it seems everyone has already gone inside. She takes a deep breath, knowing that the moment she opens these doors the condemnation event will begin. Philin watches her mistress with a worried expression, but Tiara Rose turns to her with a reassuring smile, telling her that she is fine and that she will see her later. After Philin acknowledges her, Tiara Rose inhales and exhales, slowly, mentally preparing herself for the confrontation that awaits her inside. As Tiara Rose makes her grand entrance, the announcer calls out her name and a wave of chatter spreads through the crowd, with many guests wondering why she has arrived alone. She sees Prince Heartknight standing with Akari and a group of other men who are the game's conquest targets, and she knows that the inevitable event has finally started. Tiara Rose walks towards them with purpose, noting that it's strange for all the other conquest targets to be there since she has never interacted with them, and she wonders if this is some kind of update to the game's original story. Prince Heartknights raises his voice for all to hear and proclaims that he is breaking off his engagement to Tiara Rose. The guests murmur in shock and confusion, wondering what Tiara Rose could have done and who the woman standing next to His Majesty is. Tiara Rose, however, remains composed and calmly asks him to explain the reason for his decision. Heartknights tells her to search her own heart for the answer, but Tiara Rose stands firm, stating that she has done nothing she should be ashamed of, and she suggests that if he wants to make another woman his queen, he should have made the proper preparations beforehand. In the background, the king and Tiara Rose's father can be seen watching the dramatic scene unfold from their seats. Tiara Rose's father begins to shake with anger at her perceived insolence, but she signals for him to remain calm. Heartknights then turns to Akari and comforts her, claiming that Tiara Rose must have frightened her with many comments about her countryside origins. Akari, with tears welling in her eyes, agrees but says she was okay because Sir Heartknights was there with her. Cliff Ilderun, the knight's platoon commander, speaks up in defense of farmers and people from the countryside, saying they support the country with their excellent work. Heartknights ignores him and continues to accuse Tiara Rose, claiming she told Akari to kneel and not to dance with him. Tiara Rose clarifies that she said those things out of respect for his high status as the crown prince, which is only natural. Tiara Rose patiently explains the rules of etiquette that Akari broke, pointing out that it is common sense to kneel when first meeting a member of the royal family. She then reminds Heartknights that dancing with the same person twice signifies an engagement, and Akari had danced with him twice at a previous ball. She asks him if he truly does not understand the significance of these actions. She questions how he could possibly fault her behavior when his own actions so clearly showed favoritism towards Akari over his own fiancée, and asks if he understands how humiliating that was for her. Heartknights retorts that Akari always claimed Tiara Rose was viciously attacking her. Tiara Rose looks at him directly and asks if he truly believes she is that kind of cruel person. Tiara Rose realizes with disappointment that he never bothered to verify Akari's stories, and she points out that she and Akari were never alone together, as there were always other ladies present. Heartknights is shocked to learn this, and another man nearby asks if she is referring to her followers, which prompts someone to mention her friends Lady Fleuran and Lady Marietta. Tiara Rose firmly tells Akari that those she calls followers are actually very important friends to her and she should refrain from speaking about them in such a manner. The crowd begins to whisper amongst themselves, realizing that Akari might be the vicious one after all. Tiara Rose then turns back to Heart Knights and asks for confirmation that he is breaking their engagement because he believes she was cruel to Akari, to which he hesitantly agrees. With that, Heart Knights officially breaks off the engagement and names Akari as his new fiancée, declaring that Tiara Rose's attitude towards the future queen cannot be excused. Tiara Rose thinks to herself that if this is how it ends, it might be the most peaceful outcome for her as long as she isn't banished from the kingdom. But Prince Heart Knights then goes further and proclaims that Tiara Rose is banished from the kingdom, which sends a shockwave through the room. Tiara Rose knows her father will be furious, and just as she thinks things can't get any worse, a clear voice rings out telling Prince Heart Knights to stop right there and questioning if his words are not more vicious than hers. Suddenly a handsome man appears by Tiara Rose's side and he gently tells her to take heart, saying she is the most beautiful person there and has every right to be at the party. Tiara Rose is stunned as her trembling ceases and she looks up in disbelief at her unexpected savior, who she recognizes as Your Majesty Aquasteed. Prince Aquasteed confidently walks toward Prince Heart Knights, whose footsteps echo through the silent hall, creating a tense atmosphere. Heart Knights tells him that this is none of his business, but Aquasteed coolly replies that he believes it is very much his business. Tiara Rose feels her heart thump in her chest, realizing that this dramatic turn of events was never in the original game. Surrounded by an aura of flowers, Prince Aquasteed turns to Tiara Rose and confirms that she is no longer engaged. Then, in a move that stuns everyone in the room, he asks her a simple yet profound question: "Would you become my queen?" Tiara Rose, still in a daze, can only nod in response. In a state of complete disbelief, Lady Tiara Rose is asked by Prince Aquasteed to become his queen, leaving her utterly speechless and screaming internally. She then recalls who Prince Aquasteed Marine Forest is, remembering him as the crown prince from the neighboring country of Marine Forest who came to study at the Lapis Lazuli Academy for a year. Tiara Rose remembers that in the Otome game she played in her past life, Aquasteed was not a main love interest but was announced as a main character for the sequel, which she never got to play. She reminisces about seeing the game's promotional art online, where she first saw Aquasteed's handsome and gentle smile, which also seemed to hold a hint of darkness. She became very interested in his character after seeing the design, but unfortunately, her life ended before the game was ever released. Back in the present, Tiara Rose is overwhelmed by the reality of the situation, thinking that this must all be a dream as the handsome prince has just proposed to her. Prince Aquasteed kneels before a flustered Tiara Rose, gently holding her hand and bringing it to his lips for a soft kiss. He pleads with her to at least consider his sudden proposal, which makes her blush intensely as she feels completely overwhelmed by his charm, something even her former fiancé Prince Heart Knights never made her feel. Her heart pounds in her chest as she struggles to comprehend what is happening, and she finds herself calling out for her father in her mind out of sheer panic. Looking down at the prince, Tiara Rose is filled with a sense of happiness and thanks him with a gentle expression. This sentiment is witnessed by Akari, who is watching from the side and becomes visibly upset, mumbling that this can't be happening. Akari suddenly rushes forward and grabs Prince Aquasteed's arm, telling him to stop because Tiara Rose was Prince Heart Knights' fiancée just moments ago and that he deserves someone better. Tiara Rose tries to intervene, explaining to Akari that the man she is grabbing is Prince Aquasteed from Marine Forest and that she must let him go immediately. Akari insists that it isn't right for him to propose to Tiara Rose, while Tiara Rose tries to pull her away, explaining that he is not someone she can just grab hold of like that. Tiara Rose internally panics, realizing that Akari doesn't understand the gravity of her actions, which could cause a major diplomatic incident between their kingdoms. Prince Aquasteed, however, simply shrugs Akari's hand off his arm and turns to Tiara Rose, thanking her for her concern with a gentle smile. Akari is surprised by his calm demeanor, believing that the kind prince wouldn't get angry over this. Her assumption is proven wrong when Prince Aquasteed's expression turns cold and intimidating, causing her to flinch in fear. He sternly reminds her that he is the first prince of the kingdom of Marine Forest and questions if she understands the insolence of her actions before ordering his guards to take her away. Tiara Rose bows deeply, apologizing profusely to Prince Aquasteed for the incident, but he tells her there is no need for her to apologize and asks her to raise her head. Just then, Prince Heart Knight steps forward and also bows an apology, but Aquasteed addresses him directly, confirming his identity and then telling him that he will forgive the transgression, which leaves Heart Knights looking shocked and sweating nervously. Tiara Rose feels confused by everything, but Prince Aquasteed reassures her that she did nothing wrong and only helped him. She reflects on how strange it feels for the game's events to play out in the real world, but she is still filled with pure joy at having been saved by him while Akari is being dragged away in the background. Suddenly, the king and Taiaro's father, Marquis Clementil, appear, with the king apologizing for the insult one of his citizens has shown the prince. Akari tries to explain that she was just trying to stop Taiaros from being rude to Prince Aqua, but her pleas are ignored. The king expresses his gratitude for Prince Aquastide's leniency and is surprised when the prince asks for his and the Marquis's permission to become engaged to Taiaros, stating he felt he wouldn't get another opportunity. The king finds the proposal wonderful, seeing it as a great way to bond their countries, and he also announces that due to his son's actions, Heart Knight's engagement to Taiaros is now completely called off. Marquis Clementil looks at the king and Prince Aquastide, stating that he too felt similarly about the previous engagement, especially now that his daughter has been hurt. The king notes that since this is a proposal from royalty, it is a serious matter, but the Marquis says he wants to respect his daughter's wishes, which makes Taiaros look at him with excited gratitude. Prince Aquastide smiles, calling him an ideal parent, and agrees to wait for Taiaros' answer, promising to visit her again. As the king dismisses everyone, telling Heart Knights to leave immediately and the other guests to enjoy the rest of the party, Taiaros is left to ponder why such a kind and wonderful prince would feel this way about her. Prince Aquastide then asks if she would spare some time to go out with him later, and she gladly agrees. In the carriage ride home, Taiaros thinks about how she managed to escape banishment, but now an even more unexpected event has occurred with Prince Aquastide's proposal. She glances at the prince beside her, feeling awkward as she can't think of anything to say and internally laments dying right before the sequel game featuring him was released. She continues to glance at him, wondering why he would propose to her when she is supposed to be the villain of the story. She wishes she knew more details about his character from the game, but her thoughts are interrupted when he catches her staring, causing her to blush and apologize profusely. He simply smiles and tells her that he is so happy he could dance. He tells her there is no need to apologize because he wants to do this, and then asks if his words mean he can be a little hopeful for her answer. Taiaros asks him why he has such affections for her, and he reveals that he has seen her before, reading books under a tree behind the library. He explains that he watched her often, preparing to be a worthy queen by studying, but also secretly eating sweets while she read because it made her happy. He fondly recalls how her expressions would change as she read, sometimes serious, sometimes shy, and sometimes she was even moved to tears. He confesses that when he saw her cry, he desperately wanted to hold her tight, and that calling it impossible now would be a lie. A blushing Taiaros begs him to forget he ever saw that. He continues, saying he was surprised by how enthralled he became just by watching her read under the tree every day. He admits he feels terrible for spying on her, but now that they are together, he asks if she will let him see even more of her. He explains that he knew she was Prince Heart Knight's fiancée and that he couldn't steal the royal family's bride, so he planned to endure his feelings for a year and then return to his country, trying to forget about her. However, he saw today's graduation party as a stroke of luck and a chance he couldn't afford to lose. He admits that even though he is a crown prince, he fixed his gaze on one woman and waited for the chance to take her away from her fiancé, asking her if that doesn't make him a terrible person. Taiaros assures him that he isn't terrible at all, explaining that when she was standing there alone and feeling nervous, his presence and voice were incredibly reassuring and gave her so much happiness and encouragement. She then mentions that Prince Heart Knights had threatened her with banishment, and while she isn't worried, she was still surprised. Aquastide notes that Akari also said quite a lot. He then changes the subject, saying that if Heart Knights wishes to banish her, then he might as well abduct her instead. He leans in close and kisses her hand, playfully asking her to make time for a date, which makes her heart pound with embarrassment as she realizes what kind of character he is. She tries to tell him not to tease her, but he says he was being serious. Taiaros agrees to the date, explaining that since she has graduated and no longer has bridal training, she has plenty of time. Prince Aquastide suggests 3 days from now, and she happily agrees, looking forward to it. As the carriage moves through a tree-lined road, he tells her he's glad and will pick her up on the day of their date. Taiaros then thinks to herself, wondering if there is a heroine in the sequel and if she and Prince Aquastide can truly be together, especially since his actions seem so different from someone like Prince Heart Knights. Prince Aquastide notices her lost in thought and asks if she is doubting him, to which she shyly replies that she just can't believe he finds her so favorable. He then leans in close from both sides, creating an illusion of two of him whispering to her, saying that he can't help but like her when she is so adorable. This makes her blush intensely as he calls her adorable again. Their moment is interrupted as he announces that they have unfortunately arrived at her home, a large and beautiful mansion. Meanwhile, in a guarded room inside a moonlit castle, Akari lies on a chaise lounge, questioning why she is being confined. She cries to herself, wondering why things turned out this way, as she believes Prince Aqua was supposed to be with someone else. At the Grand Castle, Prince Heart Knights approaches a door guarded by a royal knight. He sternly orders the guard to open the door, wanting to check on someone inside. The guard stands firm, explaining he has orders from the king to deny all visitors, but Heart Knights insists he will only be a moment as he just wants to see how she is doing. Heart Knights pleads with the guard, explaining he must speak with Akari to know if he has made the right choice, while a memory of a rumor about him becoming a fool for Akari flashes through his mind. He also recalls Akari happily thanking him, reinforcing his need to see her. The guard finally relents, granting him only 10 minutes before opening the large door. A joyful Akari appears with tears in her eyes, exclaiming how happy she is to see Prince Heart Knights. She explains with a radiant smile that she was getting incredibly bored because she was not allowed to leave the room. Meanwhile, Tiara Rose thinks about how her own engagement with Heart Knights has been cancelled and wonders about Prince Aquasteed's relationship with Akari, hoping Heart Knights isn't being deceived by her relieved expression. Tiara Rose continues to ponder the situation, realizing that Akari must have grown close to the prince very early on, leading to this unexpected outcome even after the engagement was nullified. Heart Knights recalls that while he was harshly warned about his actions, Akari was always there for him, making him feel he could rely on her completely. Heart Knights gently asks Akari if something is troubling her, suspecting that Lady Tiara Rose might have said something to upset her. Akari quietly mutters to herself about the unexpected involvement of the villainous daughter after the main story seemed to have concluded. Akari tearfully asks Prince Heart Knights when they can finally be together, expressing her loneliness. He gently holds her cheek, telling her that it might be a little while longer and asks for her patience. He promises to speak with his father that very night and will tell her the outcome, to which she agrees to wait. Akari then expresses her concern for Prince Aquasteed, wanting to help Heart Knights before Tiara Rose can harm him. However, Heart Knights looks tired and internally wishes she would focus on their own situation instead, feeling he doesn't want to discuss it any further. Just then, a guard appears at the doorway, announcing that Heart Knights' time is up. The prince apologizes for being unreasonable and tells Akari he must leave, instructing her to ask a maid if she needs anything. As he turns to go, a pouting Akari begs him not to leave and rushes toward him, but he simply promises he will be back before the door closes behind him. Later that evening, Prince Heart Knights sits down for dinner with his father, the king. The king mentions that he heard Heart Knights visited Lady Akari, and the prince apologizes for his selfish actions but claims they were necessary. Heart Knights then reflects that he should have paid more attention to what Tiara Rose had told him. Heart Knights clenches his fist in regret, admitting to his father that he completely ignored Tiara Rose and instead chose to believe everything Akari said. The king tells him his actions were unacceptable for a royal and a human being, reminding him of the long-standing engagement he had arranged between him and Lady Tiara Rose. Heart Knights explains that after meeting Akari, he thought hard about their future together because she is very fond of him, all while feeling remorse for Tiara Rose. The king reminds his son that Lady Tiara Rose always understood her duties as a noble and watched over him steadfastly because she cared for the kingdom. This makes Heart Knights finally realize just how important he was to Tiara Rose. He remembers moments when Tiara Rose stood by him, such as when she comforted him by holding his hand and telling him they could be strong together. He also recalls her scolding him for neglecting his studies and for improperly using his authority over the knights, showing how she always tried to guide him. Heart Knights confesses to his father that he failed to believe Tiara Rose and deeply hurt her. The king acknowledges that his son's realization is a sign of maturity but emphasizes that the situation is still very serious. 2 days after the graduation party, Tiara Rose is seen sighing, prepared to accept whatever comes next. Tiara Rose and her father are summoned by His Majesty to a hall lined with portraits of past kings. She feels anxious, wondering if she is about to be sent to prison. The king reminds her that she once visited this very hall with Heart Knights when they were young, a memory she confirms. She fondly remembers being 10 years old, holding hands with a young Prince Heart Knights as he excitedly led her through the castle. He proudly gave her permission to enter the royal portrait gallery and pointed out the portrait of his father. In that cherished memory, the young prince declared that his own portrait would one day hang beside his father's. In the present, the king confirms that Heart Knights was indeed very excited about this prospect, but then he gravely informs a confused Tiara Rose that her son's portrait will never be hung there. Tiara Rose immediately understands the gravity of the king's words. Heart Knight's right to the throne is being revoked. The king bows deeply to her, apologizing for the terrible things his son has done. Tiara Rose quickly insists that there is no need for him to apologize. She feels the punishment is too severe, arguing that Heart Knight's is still young and can mature. The king, however, tells her she is too kind and firmly states that Heart Knight's is not worthy of his royal position. The king declares that his decision is final and will not be changed, which Tiara Rose solemnly accepts. Then, with a surprising shift in tone and a smile, the king asks for her thoughts on Prince Aquasteed, leaving Tiara Rose completely stunned. Flustered by the sudden question, Tiara Rose blurts out in surprise. Her father notes that Prince Aquasteed will be returning to his home country soon and asks for her true feelings. She shyly admits that a prince like Aquasteed is far too good for someone like her, much to the amusement of the king and her father. The king explains that her engagement to Heart Knight's is officially over and that Prince Aquasteed has already made a formal request for her hand in marriage. He speaks highly of the neighboring prince, calling him perceptive and a future great king, and mentions that Aquasteed is very fond of Tiara Rose. Tiara Rose thanks them for their concern but says she cannot give an answer right away, feeling Prince Aquasteed wouldn't want a rushed decision. As she considers leaving her home country, the king looks at her with a kind expression and says that all he wants is for her to be happy. Back in her room, Tiara Rose feels exhausted while contemplating her future. She realizes that marrying Prince Aquasteed is a strong possibility, yet she finds it hard to believe since he is the main love interest in the game's sequel, a story she never got to play. Her heart flutters as she thinks about Prince Aquasteed, remembering her excitement when his character was first revealed. She recalls that even the game's heroine, Akari, seemed to have a liking for him, and she reflects on the strange feeling of having memories from both her life in Japan and her life as Tiara Rose. She briefly thinks about Akari's interest in the game, dismissing her as a heroine she wouldn't like before deciding to go to bed. As she walks towards her bed, she hears a tap on her window and looks around, wondering what the sound was. She wonders if someone is playing a trick by throwing rocks at her window. When she looks out, she is shocked to see Prince Aquasteed himself standing outside her balcony. From Prince Aquasteed's perspective, the Royal Lapis Lazuli Academy's graduation party was unfolding incorrectly as he watched Prince Heart Knight's and a student named Akari attempt to condemn another girl. The girl being convicted was Tiara Rose, who was also Prince Heart Knight's betrothed, and the reason for her punishment was a supposed claim that she had harassed Lady Akari. Prince Aquasteed found the situation distasteful as he observed Tiara Rose spitting in anger while Akari feigned tears, and he decided to step in. He approached King Alexander Lapis Lazuli Lactimoth, who clenched his fist in frustration over his son's behavior. The king apologized for the trouble his son was causing at a festive event, but Prince Aquasteed smiled, seeing it as a favorable opportunity for himself. With Tiara Rose watching in the background, Aquasteed boldly requested the king's permission to ask for Lady Tiara Rose's hand in marriage right then and there. The king was shocked by the request for the hand of another country's crown prince's fiancée, but he also knew that the fault for the situation lay with Heart Knight's and not with the gentle and fair Tiara Rose. Before the king could fully process, Tiara Rose's father, Prime Minister Schnauz Lapis Clementile, gave his permission. The prime minister was annoyed that the king was hesitating, stating that as Tiara Rose's father, his decision should be sufficient. Aquasteed thanked the prime minister for his blessing and said he would greet him again once Tiara Rose gave him the answer he wished for. The prime minister was sure his daughter would be pleased, while Aquasteed decided he could not let her stay in that place any longer. As he walked towards her, Aquasteed recalled the first time he ever saw her. He remembered being in the library, where his attendant Elliot pointed out that he was spending more time admiring a certain flower than reading books. Aquasteed would just chuckle, finding that her expressions changed so much he never grew bored watching her. Elliot had reminded him that Lady Tiara Rose was the fiancée of Crown Prince Heart Knight's, a fact Aquasteed knew all too well, understanding his love was an impossible one. He imagined how wonderful it would be to talk with her at evening parties or even ask her for a dance, but knew if he did he would never want to let her go. He longed to do simple things, like read books next to her or eat sweets by her side. While it is often said that first loves are not meant to be, his feelings pushed him to act. And so, fueled by these emotions, he moved forward at the party and stopped Prince Heart Knight's in his tracks. He confronted the prince directly, pointing out that his own words were far more vicious than anything Tiara Rose was accused of saying. Now, the flower that he could only gaze at from afar could finally be in his arms. In an extra scene, it seems Prince Aquasteed has gained a fan club, with female students chattering about him. His friend points out how popular he is, But Aquasteed is uninterested, his attention focused elsewhere. He stares out a window at Lady Tiarose, who is sighing to herself. Other students wonder what's wrong with her, guessing the book she's reading might be boring. In reality, Tiarose is completely absorbed in her sweets brain, thinking that the sweets she made yesterday were lacking something and wondering how to make them more delicious. While his friend wonders if Lady Tiarose will ever look their way, Aquasteed remains captivated, completely unaware of the fan club that adores him. On a beautiful moonlit night, Tiarose stands on her balcony, completely surprised to see Prince Aquasteed in her garden below. He greets her with a charming smile, remarking on the lovely moon, while Tiarose's heart flutters as she realizes he came all this way just to see her, a special event that never even occurred in the game she remembers. Aquasteed apologizes for his sudden arrival and effortlessly leaps onto the balcony to join her. He explains that he came alone and secretly because he knew her father would not approve of a late-night visit, and he pushes on, saying there was something he just had to show her. Standing together under the stars, Aquasteed asks if she has heard of the Star Festival of Fairies, and when Tiarose confirms she has, he smiles warmly. He tells her he is glad because that is precisely what he came to show her, leaving her utterly bewildered and questioning his words. Tiarose's mind flashes back to the game, the Ring of Lapis Lazuli, where the Star Festival was a special romantic event shared between the heroine and her chosen partner. She feels a wave of confusion, knowing that it isn't the correct day for the festival and that she isn't the game's heroine. Aquasteed senses her doubt and explains that while the timing isn't perfect, the power of the fairies will make it possible for them. He tells her that the festival is a rare sight from her kingdom, a phenomenon where fairies from the forest, sea, and sky cause stars to fall from the sky once a year in the neighboring Marin forest. Raising his arm to the heavens, Aquasteed asks for her hand, and Tiarose shyly places her hand in his. He then calls out to the fairies, and a gentle wind begins to swirl around them. As he holds her hand, Tiarose feels her heart pounding in her chest. Noticing she's wearing only a light nightgown, Aquasteed expresses his concern that she might be cold and gently drapes his own elegant coat over her shoulders. Tiarose thanks him with a blush, now worrying that he will be the one to catch a cold. He reassures her that his training has made him tough and his only worry is for her health, asking her to forgive him for his forceful visit. Tiarose begins to confess that she isn't bothered at all and is actually very happy he came. She finishes her sentence, telling him she is very happy too, which brings a soft chuckle from the prince. He then directs her attention upward, telling her to look at the sky. Tiarose feels a moment of panic, unsure what to do or say next, feeling completely overwhelmed by the situation. But as she lifts her gaze, her breath catches in her throat at the magnificent sight of a sky filled with a cascade of countless falling stars. She whispers that it's beautiful, her eyes wide with wonder, while Aquasteed watches her with a relieved and gentle smile, glad that she loves his surprise. Tiarose is filled with joy, thinking it's amazing that the prince created this magical moment just for her. As she marvels at the scene, her mind flashes to the beautiful event artwork from the game, realizing she is now living in that moment. Aquasteed slowly reaches out and cups her cheek, his touch smooth and gentle, telling her how glad he is that she likes it. Looking into his eyes, which she thinks are as sweet as honey, Tiarose feels herself being completely drawn in by his gentle and respectful demeanor. Her heart beats wildly as she wonders what she should do, feeling captivated by his presence. Snapping back to reality, Tiarose offers to prepare her favorite tea for him, but he politely declines. She then suggests bringing the tea set out onto the balcony, only to blush furiously when she realizes she just unintentionally invited a man into her room, worrying he might think her improper. Seeing her distress, Aquasteed chuckles warmly and accepts her offer, saying he could hardly refuse if she insists. While he waits, Tiarose carefully prepares black tea with honey to warm them up, along with a plate of madeleines and macarons, hoping he will enjoy them. When she returns, he insists that she wear his coat to stay warm, gently placing it back on her shoulders as she fidgets, blushing from the closeness and the lingering scent of the prince on the fabric. They sit together on a comfortable sofa on her balcony, a place Aquasteed admits he never knew existed. Tiarose explains that it's her secret reading spot, and sharing it with him makes her feel as if she is doing something wonderfully wrong. As they share the tea, Tiarose feels herself growing more flustered by their proximity, her heart pounding in her chest. Aquasteed compliments her tea, noting the honey, and she smiles brightly, explaining that she likes it because it's healthy and pairs well with sweets. She then shyly offers him the madeleines, though she worries it might be too late for him to eat sweets. Aquasteed kindly takes one, reassuring her that he will of course have some since she prepared them herself. He takes a bite and tells her it's delicious, making her feel a wave of relief, even as she wonders if he is just being kind. Feeling more comfortable, Tiara begins to passionately talk about her love for sweets and how she enjoys baking new creations to try while she reads in her secret spot. She quickly catches herself, feeling embarrassed for rambling on about such things to a prince, but Aquastide simply smiles and notes how fond she is of sweets and books. Tiara apologizes for being ill-mannered, but he quickly stops her, telling her she looks adorable when she talks about sweets and that he could listen to her forever. She reflects on her past life and her love for games and sweets, realizing that her passion for baking has grown even stronger in this new world. Glancing at the prince's sweet smile, Tiara feels herself melting, thinking that he is far sweeter than any sugar or honey. She imagines that on the day she eventually marries him, she will likely melt from pure happiness. Aquastide watches her blush deepen, amused to see that even her ears have turned red. The scene then shifts to the day of their official date, with her maid, Villainess, helping Tiara get ready by placing a beautiful coral hairpiece from Marin Forest in her hair. The mansion servants are shown to adore Prince Aquastide and hold a strong dislike for Prince Heart Knights after the events of the graduation party. Villainess teases Tiara about her excitement, joking that she can't bear to wait for the prince any longer and expressing how glad everyone is that she was saved from the idiot prince. Just then, Prince Aquastide's carriage arrives, and Villainess playfully suggests they stop talking about unpleasant things. As Tiara descends the grand staircase, her heart thumping in her chest, Villainess mischievously offers to create an alibi for her if she doesn't return from her date. Tiara, flustered, insists she will return properly. At the bottom of the stairs, Prince Aquastide is waiting, and he takes her hand, leading her to the carriage as their date finally begins. Tiara and Prince Aquastide stand together in a beautiful, open field with a path leading to a large, solitary tree. She thinks to herself that it is a wonderful place for a date and wonders why it was never featured in the game she remembers, but she feels glad she could experience it with the prince. As they prepare for a picnic, Prince Aquastide kindly offers Tiara his hand, an act of consideration that she appreciates. She notices that the royal maids have already set up a lovely seating area for them without her even realizing it. The prince suggests they take a break with some tea, thinking she must be tired from the ride. Tiara's heart flutters as she realizes this is her very first date, a new and elegant experience she never had with her former fiancé, Prince Heart Knights. They sit together under the shade of a tree, where Prince Aquastide thoughtfully asks if she is feeling cold, but Tiara assures him that she is quite comfortable with the warm sun and gentle breeze. He then graciously pours her a cup of his favorite tea, hoping that she will enjoy it as well. Tiara is pleasantly surprised by how friendly and relaxed the crown prince is in private, which is a stark contrast to his formal behavior at the graduation party. She was worried he might be too stuffy, but this closer interaction makes her heart beat faster. The prince asks if she would prefer milk or lemon in her tea, recommending she try it with milk. Tiara happily accepts his suggestion and asks for milk. He smiles and remarks that they have similar tastes, as he also enjoys milk in his tea during the winter and early spring. He passes her the cup, and she thanks him while enjoying its lovely scent. Tiara then presents Prince Aquastide with a small, beautifully wrapped gift. He looks on with curiosity as she reveals a batch of cookies she baked herself. The prince is incredibly happy to learn she made them for him and enthusiastically comments on their amazing aroma. After taking a bite, he is stunned by how delicious they are, expressing his amazement that she could create something so wonderful. Tiara quietly reflects that she recalled dessert recipes from her past life and decided cookies were a practical choice since she was unsure of their date plans. Prince Aquastide then playfully offers to feed a cookie to Tiara, asking her to open her mouth. Tiara is completely taken aback and blushes intensely, feeling dizzy from his sweet and unexpected gesture. She internally panics, feeling unprepared for such intimacy but also thinking it would be rude to refuse the crown prince's offer. Despite her overwhelming embarrassment, Tiara shyly accepts the cookie from his hand, covering her mouth as she crunches on it. Prince Aquastide watches her with a gentle chuckle, enjoying her flustered reaction while she squeezes her eyes shut from the embarrassment. He admits to himself that he was planning to get her flustered to make her notice him more, and her bright red face makes him wonder if he can be even bolder. He tells her she is adorable even when she eats, making her look at him in surprise. Leaning closer, he gently reaches for her hand and softly asks if he may call her by the nickname Tara. The request sends her heart racing once again. Tiara feels no discomfort at his request, a feeling that is very different from when Prince Heartknights used the same name. Though incredibly embarrassed, she is happy and agrees, telling him he can call her Aqua in return. Delighted by her answer, he gently squeezes her hand. Overcome with joy, Prince Aquasteed suddenly pulls Tiara Rose into a warm embrace. Startled by his affectionate move, she lets out a small cry of surprise. Held so close, Tiara Rose worries he will hear her heart pounding in her chest, but then she feels his own heart beating just as fast. She realizes with a blush that he is just as nervous as she is. He seems hesitant for a moment before he pulls away slightly, saying it is too bad, as she explains it was just too embarrassing for her. Tiara Rose is so flustered that she cannot look him in the eye. Prince Aquasteed apologizes for being too hasty, but then he leans in and playfully whispers that she looks like she wants him to kiss her. He moves even closer, his face just inches from hers, and confesses that he can't help but want her when she is near. He admits that he had planned to take their relationship slowly with more dates, but once again says it's too bad, because he finds it hard to hold back. Tiara Rose feels overwhelmed by his sweet smile and gentle words, thinking she might not be able to handle it if he continues to be so charming. Prince Aquasteed then makes another playful request, asking if Tiara Rose will feed him more of her cookies. Surprised by his childlike appeal, she agrees, and he opens his mouth with a wide, happy smile like a cute puppy. She feeds him another cookie, and he chews it thoughtfully before declaring it delicious and saying he could eat a ton of them. He thanks her sincerely, admitting that he is so happy he feels he might lose control. Prince Aquasteed then whispers to a blushing Tiara Rose that he sometimes compares her to a strawberry because she is cute enough to eat. He rests his head on her shoulder with a contented sigh, feeling incredibly happy. He reflects that he never imagined he would one day be so worried about when he would finally be allowed to propose to the woman he loves. Standing together in the field of flowers, Prince Aquasteed gently strokes Tiara Rose's hair. Her heart is beating faster than ever before, and she makes a firm decision to ask her father for his approval of the engagement proposal. She quietly wonders if she, the Villainess, is truly allowed to be this happy. Later that evening, the scene shifts to the grand exterior of her family's mansion. A few hours have passed, and Tiara Rose is anxiously pacing in her room, waiting for her father to come home. Her maid, Philin, watches her with a knowing giggle, correctly guessing that the date was a great success. Tiara Rose is too embarrassed to even speak about the moments they shared, like feeding each other cookies. She touches her cheek, lost in the memory of Prince Aquasteed's soft voice asking if her wearing the hairpin he gave her was a sign that he could be hopeful. Philin snaps her out of her daydream, asking what actually happened on the date. Tiara Rose quickly becomes flustered, shaking her head and insisting that nothing too extreme occurred. Philin admits she is a little disappointed, as she imagined he might have kissed her. Tiara Rose explains that simply being fed a cookie was enough to make her heart race and that she couldn't possibly handle more. Philin smiles and reassures her, noting it is obvious that Prince Aquasteed holds her in very high regard. Philin then points out that Tiara Rose has started calling him by his nickname, Prince Aqua. Tiara Rose blushes and confirms that he is very kind and would never do anything to upset her. Philin is overjoyed for her and expresses her sincere excitement for their future together. Philin keenly observes Tiara Rose's fidgety behavior and correctly deduces that there is more to it than just the lingering memories of the date. She realizes that the prince must have proposed, and Tiara Rose is anxiously waiting for her father to return so she can ask for his permission. Tiara Rose is stunned that her maid figured it out. Just then, Philin looks out the window and sees a carriage pulling up, announcing that the master has arrived. Without a moment's hesitation, Tiara Rose dashes out of the room and runs down the stairs to meet her father. She greets her father eagerly as he arrives home. He smiles knowingly at her fidgeting and playfully asks why she is in such a hurry, correctly guessing it has to do with Prince Aquasteed. Tiara Rose confirms his suspicion and asks if she can accept the prince's proposal. Her father looks at her radiant, smiling face and thinks to himself that even though it will be lonely when she marries and moves away, her happiness is the most important thing in the world. A view of the magnificent royal castle at night is shown, hinting at her future. Meanwhile, in another location, Prince Heartknights is seen looking troubled. He reflects that he has done something irreversible and feels that while he wants Tiara Rose to be happy, he is filled with regret. He recalls his past with Tiara Rose, remembering how he was nothing more than an escort to her at parties and their time together lacked any real romance. He now understands that he should have been more focused on her, as her face is all he can think about. Even though he believes he is supposed to love Akari at a year ago, Prince Aquasteed often spent his time in the academy library, finding the history lessons on craftwork particularly interesting. He thought about how the library held many great books related to the topic as he flipped through a volume he was reading. While engrossed in his book, a slight movement caught his eye, and he looked up from the page. Through the large library window, he saw a young lady having tea outdoors with her companion, recognizing her as the daughter of Marquis Clementil, a girl named Tiaros. After a brief glance, he returned to his reading, thinking she was quite ordinary. While he turned the page. Several days later, Tiaros and her maid were also in the library, quietly reading books at a table. Aquasteed began to think about her more often, especially since she started coming to the library almost every day, sometimes looking deeply focused and other times slightly flushed as she read. He eventually found himself looking for her, a gentle smile appearing on his face as he watched her from a distance, which caught the attention of his attendant, Elliot, who called out his name with a look of concern. Elliot advised Prince Aquasteed not to entertain absurd ideas, reminding him that Tiaros was already engaged to Prince Heartknights. Aquasteed knew this but seemed unable to dismiss his feelings. Elliot mused that he had only ever seen the prince politely turn down the many beautiful women who approached him, yet he was now completely taken by Tiaros, wishing his love could be returned, though he knew there was nothing he could do. The very next day, Aquasteed was looking out the library window when it began to rain, the sound of pitter-patter filling the room as Elliot let out a small gasp behind him. He saw Tiaros and her maid caught in the downpour outside, and Elliot remarked it was a pity since she had been enjoying her books so much. As Aquasteed noted that the rain shouldn't last long, he suddenly raised his hand, prompting Elliot to call his name in alarm. The rain poured down on Tiaros and her maid, who stood on their picnic blanket beneath a tree, while her maid playfully flashed a peace sign beside a worried Tiaros. Suddenly, Tiaros' expression changed to one of pure joy and amazement as she looked up at the sky, a blush on her cheeks. A beautiful, shimmering rainbow had appeared directly above her, seemingly protecting her from the rain. In this world where magic exists, Prince Aquasteed possessed immense magical power and was also a skilled swordsman, often fighting as a magic warrior. Elliot watched his master and the girl outside, sadly reflecting that she was just someone the prince watched from a window, a person he had only spoken to once before, and he quietly wished that they could somehow be together. Outside, Tiaros celebrated the beautiful rainbow with her hands raised in delight while her maid smiled beside her, and from the window, Prince Aquasteed watched them with a content smile. Elliot, however, looked on with a pained expression, wondering why fate had to be so cruel to the prince he served. A year passed after Aquasteed first started watching Tiaros, and following the graduation party, he sat at his desk in the academy. He handed a sealed letter to Elliot, instructing him to send it to the king, and Elliot confirmed he would do so. A magical bird was then sent flying into the night, carrying the important message across the sky. As they watched the messenger bird fly away from the window, it was revealed that the letter detailed Aquasteed's plan to bring Tiaros to his home country of Marine Forest as his betrothed, along with all the necessary preparations. He explained to Elliot that he was going to marry a lady of Lapis and had included favorable trade deals for her land, insisting that everything from her rooms to the furniture must be perfect to ensure she would live without any inconvenience. Elliot commented that the prince certainly moved quickly, admitting he felt foolish for worrying when things seemed to be going well. Aquasteed agreed, saying he was surprised at himself, but he recalled the image of Tiaros trembling after her public humiliation and the sight of Prince Heartknights, and he knew that moment had been his only chance to act. He thought about how he could never allow the woman he loved to stand alone and vulnerable, imagining himself taking her hand and reassuring her that everything was all right now. He then handed another prepared letter to Elliot, this one an official engagement request to be delivered to Marquis Clementil first thing in the morning. The very next morning, Elliot returned with the news that Marquis Clementil had given his consent, and Aquasteed's wish was finally granted. Later, Tiaros and her maid were seen walking through the castle grounds, on their way to meet the prince. Tiaros and her maid waited in a guest room after announcing their arrival, with a servant informing them she would let the prince know they were here. Tiaros felt a wave of anxiety, worrying that she had come too suddenly, but her maid comforted her, explaining that her father had sent word ahead of their visit. Despite the reassurance, Tiaros clutched her chest, feeling incredibly nervous because it was their first meeting since she had agreed to marry him. As she wondered anxiously if she would get to see him, a knock came from the door, and the maid announced that Prince Aquasteed's attendant had arrived. Elliot entered the room, apologizing for the wait and explaining that the prince would be there soon, before inviting her to follow him to a prepared room. He then smiled warmly, telling her not to apologize for her sudden visit because Prince Aquastide was very happy that she came. Tiara and her maid were relieved that the prince's attendant seemed so kind, and the maid mentioned that Aquastide had only brought Elliot with him when he came to their country to study. While walking, Tiara and Elliot had a pleasant conversation about their home countries, with Tiara praising the skilled craftsmen and beautiful ornaments of lapis lazuli. Elliot replied that marine forest was rich with treasures from the sea like coral and pearls, adding that the prince would be delighted to hear her kind words, making Tiara think how nice he was. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted when a voice called out Tiara's name, causing both her and her maid to turn around with expressions of complete shock. Standing before them was Prince Heartknights, her former fiancé, who was looking directly at her in his office. Prince Aquastide looks over a document while thinking of Tiara, who has just accepted his proposal for engagement. He decides he wants to see her as soon as possible and stands up from his desk just as a series of knocks sound at his door, and he bids the visitor to enter. Tiara's father enters the room, apologizing for the sudden intrusion, but Prince Aquastide warmly welcomes him. The Marquis explains that his daughter wishes to meet the prince today, and Aquastide happily agrees, which brings a smile to the Marquis's face. Aquastide expresses his gratitude for the engagement and says he looks forward to meeting Lady Tiara, while her father assures him that all preparations have been made. As the Marquis takes his leave, he considers that the prince must truly love his daughter to have arranged everything so quickly with both the king and marine forest. While walking down a long hall, he reflects on the unfortunate events with Prince Heartknights but feels relieved that Tiara will marry someone strong and who is deeply in love with her. Meanwhile, Prince Aquastide waits in the rose garden, wondering why Tiara and his attendant Elliot are taking so long to arrive. He had asked Elliot to deliver some documents and then escort her to the garden, and while he knows the castle is safe, he can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. A worried expression crosses his face as he considers the possibility that they might have encountered Prince Heartknights on the way. The scene then cuts to Tiara confronting someone, asking why they are here. Tiara is standing before Prince Heartknights, who correctly assumes she is there to meet Prince Aquastide. Heartknights looks down with a pained expression and clenches his fist as Tiara, her maid Philin and Elliot watch him. He takes a step toward her and calls her name, only to suddenly bow deeply in apology for his behavior at the graduation party, which leaves Tiara completely surprised. Tiara quickly tells him to raise his head, reminding him that royalty should not bow so easily, but he insists that he doesn't care about such formalities. She is glad to see that the character she liked in her past life has been able to reflect on his actions, likely due to a stern lecture from the king. However, the situation takes a turn when Prince Heartknights grabs her hands, his voice sounding unpleasantly sweet as he pleads with her, causing a feeling of disgust to wash over her. Just as he grips her hands, another hand clamps down on his wrist, stopping him. Prince Aquastide has arrived, his face filled with anger as he demands to know what Prince Heartknights thinks he is doing with his precious fiancée. Tiara's fear melts away at his words, and she calls out his name with relief. He gently pulls her away and kisses her hand, apologizing for being late and asking if she is all right. Holding her close, Prince Aquastide resolves to protect her from Heartknights, who he thinks is shamelessly trying to win her back after treating her so horribly. Prince Aquastide then addresses Prince Heartknights directly, stating firmly that Tiara is his fiancée and warning him not to touch her again. Heartknights apologizes, admitting he was unaware of the official engagement. Aquastide decides to forgive him this time and leads Tiara away, promising that tea and her favorite sweets are waiting for them. As they depart with Elliot, Philin clenches her fist angrily while watching them go, leaving Heartknights standing alone. Later, at a table laden with desserts, Tiara apologizes for her sudden visit, but Aquastide reassures her that he had been planning to visit her himself. She becomes nervous in his presence, though she's been in the castle garden many times before. When Aquastide asks if she likes cake, she enthusiastically declares her love for them, especially strawberry sweets, which happen to be a specialty of his home country. She gets a bit carried away talking about cakes, cookies, and pudding before shyly apologizing. Aquastide is delighted she enjoys them and explains that he had the strawberries specially sent from his home. A delicious-looking slice of strawberry cake is placed before her, and she takes a bite, her face lighting up with happiness as she exclaims how delicious it is. Tiara then brings up the earlier incident, but Prince Aquastide tells her it was only normal for him to protect her, leaving her confused. He leans in closer and explains that as her fiancé, it is his duty and desire to protect her. His words make Tiara's heart pound in her chest, and she feels a mix of embarrassment and overwhelming happiness to hear him say it so directly. He then takes her hand and thanks her for choosing him, but she insists that she is the grateful one. In this peaceful moment, she feels completely safe with him. Prince Aquasteed calls over his attendant, Elliot, and introduces him as a skilled servant in both combat and politics. Elliot reintroduces himself, explaining that he is not a nobleman but has served the prince for many years. Next, Tiaros introduces her maid, Philin Sunfist, who has served her since childhood and is like an older sister to her. Tiaros worries internally, as there had been no discussion about bringing a maid with her to Marine Forest, and she feels it might be unfair to ask Philin to move so far from home. However, Philin looks at her with unwavering loyalty and declares that she intends to serve her always, touching Tiaros deeply. Relieved that Tiaros has such a loyal companion, Aquasteed asks Elliot to speak with Philin and give her some advice for the upcoming trip to Marine Forest. As their attendants step away to talk, Aquasteed smiles warmly and invites Tiaros to come closer to him. He gently cups her face in his hands, admiring her beauty and chuckling at her nervous reaction. He admits that while he enjoys their time as a group, he wishes to have a moment alone with her. Flustered by his closeness, Tiaros listens as he thanks her again for accepting his proposal and says he wants to ask her properly, without formalities. Looking into her eyes, Prince Aquasteed declares his love for her with all his heart and formally asks Lady Tiaros Lapis Clamantil to be his wife. Overcome with emotion, she joyfully accepts his proposal. An ecstatic Aquasteed pulls her into a tight hug, apologizing for his excitement but explaining he's just so happy. He whispers that he loves her before leaning in to kiss her, and she thinks about the bliss of being held and kissed by the one she loves. He kisses her again and again, admitting he couldn't stop because he finds her too cute. Tiaros feels weak in his arms, her face flushed with a mixture of happiness and embarrassment, wondering how she'll ever be able to look at him again. Suddenly, their intimate moment is interrupted by a blinding flash of light that erupts around them. Guards rush into the garden in alarm, shouting about a strange and powerful magic they've never encountered before. As Prince Aquasteed shields Tiaros from the potential danger, she recognizes the brilliant light and realizes with a start that it must be the heroine's special magic, Holy Prayer. The Ring of Lapis Lazuli, which features a commoner heroine whom a margrave adopts. The day she arrives in the royal capital, she is fated to meet two people. The heroine, Akari, peeks out from her carriage before stepping out into the town. Elsewhere, a 14-year-old Heart Knight's Lapis Lazuli Lactomyth sneaks into town. According to the game's story, the heroine is supposed to get lost and ask Heart Knights for directions, leading to their first encounter. However, as Akari walks through the town, a sign begins to fall right above her. Heart Knight spots the danger and shouts for her to watch out, pushing her out of the way just in time. Heart Knights asks Akari if she is all right after the close call. She replies that she was very frightened, and he is relieved she wasn't hurt. Akari then notices that Prince Heart Knight's arm is bleeding from a small scratch he received while saving her. Despite his assurances that it's nothing, Akari insists on seeing his arm. She takes his arm and uses healing magic, causing the scratch to disappear. Heart Knights thanks her and asks for her name. She introduces herself as Akari Tedalite, which he recognizes. Heart Knights wonders if they have met before, but Akari doesn't recall it, though she has seen his face. This encounter was supposed to happen the next day at the academy. Heart Knight says he hopes they can talk more another time, but he has no time today. He then thanks her for giving him directions, which confuses him since he didn't, and he says he'll see her again before leaving. The next day at the academy, Akari Tedalite is introduced as a new transfer student. During recess, Akari excitedly greets Prince Heart Knights, telling him how much she looked forward to meeting him. He is surprised to see her as a student there and thinks to himself that she is cheerful and honest with her emotions, unlike most ladies who act more gracefully. Akari's genuine and cute demeanor charms him, and when she asks for a tour of the school, he agrees. She enthusiastically pulls him by the arm to start the tour. As they walk, others notice that Akari is holding the arm of a man who is already betrothed. Meanwhile, Tiaros's friends express concern that Prince Heart Knights is with another girl, but Tiaros remains composed. She explains that since they are at the academy and Akari is a new, anxious student, she will talk to the prince about it later to avoid embarrassing him. Secretly, Tiaros feels a sting of jealousy over Akari's uninhibited behavior and notes that she and the prince have never linked arms outside of formal balls. While on the tour, Prince Heart Knights finds Akari's cheerful conversation to be a refreshing break from the pressures of being royalty. The following morning, Prince Heartknights wakes up in his bed, having stayed up all night thinking. He regrets not being more attentive to Tiaros. When his attendant comes in, he asks if something is wrong. Meanwhile, Akari is confined to a room, bored without Prince Heartknights around. She is frustrated that she can't leave because a knight is always on guard. To pass the time, she decides to practice magic. A mysterious bright light suddenly shines, causing confusion and prompting the question of whether this could be the heroine's powerful magic, the holy prayer. As the light envelopes the area, Tiaros recalls a tender moment when Prince Aquastide held her hand tightly, smiling as he promised to always protect her while they sat together surrounded by beautiful roses. Now, she looks on with a troubled heart, realizing she had completely forgotten about the existence of the holy prayer, a crucial element from the game's story. A memory from a class lecture surfaces, where a teacher explained that the holy prayer is the rarest form of magic, a gift of purification that can only be used by one person at a time, protecting the entire country. The wielder of this power is granted the title of Lapis, and upon their death, it is said they are reborn, though their new identity and location remain a mystery. Tiaros is stunned because she knows the special person who possesses this power is the game's heroine, Akari. In the original story, Akari awakened this ability right after the conviction event, so Tiaros is bewildered as to why it is happening now, wondering if her own presence in this world has somehow changed the timing of these fated events. Back in the present, the brilliant light finally fades as Prince Aquastide holds Tiaros protectively in his arms. A knight named Elliot announces he will investigate the matter and runs off to check on things, while Tiaros mate assures her that he will return soon with information. Despite these assurances, Tiaros is deeply worried, knowing that the power of the holy prayer is something every kingdom would desire, but Prince Aquastide comforts her, telling her not to worry. Tiaros' mind races with anxiety as she considers that both her kingdom, Lapis Lazuli, and Prince Aquastide's kingdom of Marine Forest would be desperate to possess such power, often securing it by marrying the magic user into the royal family. A dreadful thought enters her mind. What if Prince Aquastide is also after the heroine's power? She tries to shake off the unsettling idea, telling herself it's impossible, but her face is filled with worry as she fears the game's story might be progressing toward a difficult conclusion. A deep chill runs through Tiaros as she sits alone, fearing that these new developments could be leading toward the events of the game's sequel. Just then, Prince Aquastide approaches and gently pats her head, softly reassuring her that everything is fine and she has no reason to worry. Later, as they sit together at a table, Tiaros' maid, Philin, serves them tea, mentioning that she made it a little sweeter than usual. Tiaros thanks her with a warm smile. A short while after, a knight in full armor clanks as he approaches them with a report. The knight informs them that the light was caused by a malfunctioning magic device and that there are no current problems. He advises Lady Tiaros to return home for her safety until all the devices have been fully inspected. Prince Aquastide listens calmly and agrees with the assessment, while Tiaros looks on with a concerned expression. Prince Aquastide instructs Philin to prepare the carriage for their departure. Philin expresses her relief, glad that it was just a faulty device and nothing more serious. Aquastide then tells Tiaros that she should return to her mansion and that he will personally escort her there. Despite her outward compliance, Tiaros is filled with sadness and frustration. She desperately wants to stay and witness what happens next but knows she cannot voice such a desire. It's agonizing for her to know nothing for certain and to have to accept the official story of a malfunctioning device, all the while silently hoping that Prince Aquastide will not choose the heroine over her. Meanwhile, Prince Aquastide waits in his room, noting that while the castle has grown calm, his trusted aide Elliot is unusually late. He knows Elliot is exceptionally skilled in intelligence work, so his prolonged absence could only mean that the report they received about a malfunctioning device was a complete lie. Sitting at his desk, Aquastide concludes that something significant must have transpired. He feels powerless, unable to investigate the castle himself, and knows that King Alexander will handle the situation with a firm hand. All he can do now is wait for Elliot to return with the truth. To pass the time, Aquastide immerses himself in his paperwork, efficiently finishing not only the day's tasks but also the work scheduled for tomorrow. He smiles softly, motivated by the thought of his future with Tiaros, fondly remembering a moment when he held her close and kissed her. As night falls over the castle, a maid brings him dinner. He allows her to enter and serve the meal, but his focus remains on his documents, waiting for any news. Finally, there are 3 knocks at the door, and an exhausted Elliot stumbles in. Aquastide immediately asks what happened. Panting, Elliot delivers the shocking news. Lady Akari, who had been with Prince Heartknights, has awakened the legendary Holy Prayer. Prince Aquasteed is visibly stunned by this revelation, his thoughts flashing to an image of Akari and Prince Heartknights. He muses that since the last Holy Prayer user died years ago, it makes sense for a new one to appear. However, he finds it extremely troublesome that the new user is Lady Akari of all people. With a sigh, he looks down at his wine glass and firmly declares that he wants her. Elliot and Aquasteed discuss the implications, realizing the king must be trying to keep Akari's power a secret since they were initially told the light was just a malfunction. Elliot speculates that the king will try to marry Akari to Prince Heartknights to bolster his position, even though Heartknights is no longer the heir apparent. Aquasteed finds the situation very troublesome, knowing the king would do anything to keep such an asset. The king will now act much more cautiously because having the Holy Prayer user guarantees peace and prosperity for the nation. Aquasteed knows King Alexander would never give her up, even if it meant war with another kingdom. Contemplating his next move, Aquasteed decides he might have to use his own power to intervene and gives Elliot his orders, which the loyal aide accepts with a bow, understanding that securing the Holy Prayer would be a great boon for their own country. 10 days pass without any official word about Akari's awakening, and Tiara Rose has not been back to the castle. Prince Aquasteed visits her every other day but never mentions the incident, leaving her to wonder if he is hiding the truth from her. She is certain the royal family is keeping it a secret, and she feels trapped, unable to ask anyone about it without revealing her own hidden knowledge. Her maid, Philin, interrupts her thoughts, announcing that preparations for her marriage training in Marine Forest are complete. Philin excitedly declares that she will be accompanying Tiara Rose and intends to serve her forever. Tiara Rose, however, is preoccupied, wondering when they will leave and how this new development will affect Prince Aquasteed's plans to return to his own country. Tiara Rose knows that Aquasteed was only supposed to stay for a year of study, but the situation with Lady Akari has made everything complicated. With both kingdoms vying for the Holy Prayer's power, the political landscape has become treacherous. She feels utterly frustrated, able to do nothing but wait for Prince Aquasteed to contact her, praying that this complicated matter will be resolved soon. Several days passed at the Grand Estate when a letter arrived from Prince Aqua, announcing his intention to visit again. Inside, Tiara Rose sat gracefully by a window, holding a letter and sighing with relief as she thought about how things had finally been settled, and thankfully, she had not received any bad news from her father. In preparation for the prince's visit, Tiara Rose went to the kitchen, where birds chirped happily outside the window. She proudly presented a tray of beautifully made desserts, including a large cake and several small tarts adorned with fruit, to her maid, Philin. Tiara Rose smiled brightly and asked what Philin thought of them, to which the delighted maid clasped her hands and exclaimed that they looked very delicious. Feeling glad, Tiara Rose requested that the sweets be sent up to her room, and Philin happily obliged, taking the tray from her. Later, Tiara Rose admired a small fruit tart in her hands, fondly remembering how she loved these pastries in her past life and ate them all the time. As she imagined sharing them with Prince Aqua, she hoped he would like them. Filled with happy anticipation, she took a small bite of a tart while sitting in her room, thinking about how she even topped them with strawberries and couldn't wait to see his reaction, feeling confident he would love them because they were so delicious. Soon, a maid entered to announce that Prince Aquasteed's carriage had just arrived. Tiara Rose stood with Philin in her room, feeling a wave of nostalgia as she realized she would be leaving soon and would miss the fond memories of tea parties with her friends. Philin mentioned that it was a shame it was cloudy, otherwise they could have had tea on the terrace, but Tiara Rose assured her that she didn't mind at all because she was just so happy. Tiara Rose peeked through the window and saw a grand carriage outside, from which Prince Aquasteed emerged with a serious expression, attended by a footman. As she watched him, her own reflection in the window pane showed a look of shock, and an imaginary crackle appeared on the glass. Once inside, Prince Aqua gently took Tiara Rose's hands and apologized for not visiting recently, explaining that he was busy with various preparations. Before she could fully respond, he pulled her into a warm embrace, surprising her as she told him not to worry about it. In the background, Philin quietly shuffled out of the room and closed the door to give them privacy, while Tiara Rose composed herself and invited the prince to come further inside. Prince Aqua tenderly held her face and apologized for keeping her waiting, explaining that he was at least able to finish everything he needed to do. Tiara Rose smiled brightly, assuring him she was fine, and he leaned in to give her a gentle kiss on the cheek, telling her how much he wanted to see her before they shared a series of sweet kisses. After their kiss, Prince Aqua smiled warmly and told Tiara Rose she looked very cute today, which made her blush deeply with embarrassment. He then charmingly asked if he could kiss her again, causing her to blush even more as he chuckled at how adorable she was. Prince Aqua then gave her a gentle hug from behind and patted her head, while Tiara Rose thought to herself that she was far too embarrassed to say yes. Her heart pounded in her chest as she panicked internally, wondering what to do since it hadn't been long since her very first kiss. Though she knew it wasn't that she disliked it, she just didn't know how to respond. He then turned her around and leaned in for another kiss as she stood near her bed. He whispered her name, making her heart flutter as he kissed her forehead and then her lips once more, causing her to flinch slightly from the sweet intimacy. Tiara Rose found herself squeezing the fabric of his clothes as her eyes slowly closed, her heart still pounding while she thought that even though it was embarrassing, she truly liked it. She felt her knees go weak as they continued to kiss, feeling so flustered that it was as if she were in someone else's body. Prince Aqua then sat down on the edge of the bed and pulled Tiara Rose onto his lap, saying he wanted to be close to her for a little longer, which made her blush. As she settled in his arms, his expression turned serious, and he told her that an engagement had been decided, leaving her looking confused. He then clarified that it was Lady Akari's engagement, adding that he knew it wasn't something she would want to hear about, and Tiara Rose's heart thumped in shock as she wondered who the engagement was with. Her mind raced with thoughts from the game, remembering that Prince Aqua was a capture target in the sequel, which meant it wouldn't be strange for him to become engaged to the heroine, Lady Akari. Seeing her troubled expression, Prince Aqua offered to stop talking about it, but she shook her head, determined to hear the truth. He looked at her with concern, wondering why she was so anxious about the woman who had hurt her so deeply. Gathering her courage, Tiara Rose clasped her hands and insisted she was fine, pleading with him to tell her everything. He agreed but said it must remain a secret, and she nodded in acceptance. Still holding her close, he gently caressed her hair and told her to let him know if she felt uncomfortable before revealing the truth. He explained that the woman who had treated her like a villain, Akari, was to be engaged to Prince Heartknights. Tiara Rose let out a long sigh of relief, a happy blush spreading across her face as she realized this meant Akari would not be engaged to Prince Aqua. He was initially confused by her reaction, so she apologized and explained that she was just so relieved because she had been very afraid, thinking that he was the one who was going to be engaged to Lady Akari. Prince Aqua held her tightly and reassured her that he would never choose someone else over her, apologizing for causing her to worry. He tenderly told her she didn't have to cry anymore, but tears of relief were already streaming down her face as she insisted she wasn't crying. Looking into each other's eyes, he told her that he was taking her with him to Marine Forest, and she tearfully asked if he would stay by her side forever. He promised he would, and she happily agreed to go with him before they shared another loving kiss. He then explained that since Prince Heartknights was no longer the heir, his younger brother, the 7-year-old Prince Sirius, would take his place and had been engaged to the 12-year-old Charlotte to secure the backing needed for his claim. He continued by saying Prince Sirius would become king and would be assisted by Prince Heartknights and Lady Akari, who could use the Holy Prayer, resolving the kingdom's succession neatly. Prince Aqua then told Tiara Rose his plans, stating he would go home on the 10th and that she would come with him to begin her training. Later that evening, Tiara Rose smiled to herself, feeling incredibly glad that Prince Aqua didn't get engaged to the heroine. As she sipped her tea, she reflected that while the conviction event had been painful, she could now see it as just a scenario from a game. Remembering Prince Aqua's kindness, she felt sure she would sleep well that night. While Tiara Rose was sound asleep, a bright light suddenly shone in her dark room, and a figure with long black hair materialized. The mysterious visitor remarked on how useful teleportation magic was and wished Tiara Rose a good evening. Startled awake, Tiara Rose sat up in bed and stared in shock at her unexpected guest, recognizing her as Lady Akari. Tiara Rose is startled by a creaking door and is shocked to see Lady Akari standing there, wondering how she could have gotten past the guards since she was supposed to be confined to the castle. Akari approaches with a serene smile, explaining that she has given things a lot of thought, while Tiara Rose internally confirms her suspicion that Akari, like herself, is a reincarnated person. As Tiara Rose cautiously wonders what Akari intends to do, Akari catches her completely off guard by directly asking if she has also played the game before, causing Tiara Rose to gasp in surprise. Akari reveals her reasoning, explaining that everyone else, including Prince Heartknights and Tiara Rose's brother Mowgli's, acted exactly as they did in the game's storyline, and Tiara Rose was the only one whose actions were different. Tiara Rose internally agrees that Akari is correct but also realizes that Akari has no concrete proof and that her own features are more fitting for a game character than Akari's. Deciding to play dumb, Tiara Rose tells Akari that she doesn't understand what she's talking about, though Akari says it's alright if she wants to feign ignorance. Akari continues, mentioning her original plan was to marry Prince Heartknights for her happy ending, but she was shocked when Prince Aqua, her true favorite character from the game's sequel, appeared, and since he is her ideal choice, she had to change her plans, leading Tiara Rose to suspect Akari wants her to break up with him. Akari smiles triumphantly, glad that her trick has worked to confirm her suspicions, while Tiara Rose decides to come clean and admits that she was reincarnated and has memories of playing the game when she was Japanese. This new information makes Akari wonder why Tiara Rose looks exactly like the game character, which leads her to correctly guess that Tiara Rose knows nothing about the sequel's events or its heroine. Akari asks if Tiara Rose died before playing the sequel, which Tiara Rose confirms is true, leading to Akari muttering in disbelief while covering her mouth in horror. Tiara Rose looks on with annoyance, internally lamenting that now she wants to play the sequel more than ever to collect all of Prince Aqua's beautiful event CGs, and at that moment, Akari forcefully grabs her hand. Suddenly bursting into tears, Akari dramatically calls Tiara Rose a poor, pitiful thing for never having experienced the sequel, which she passionately calls the most wonderful otome game ever. She grabs Tiara Rose's shoulders, insisting that Prince Aqua is far dreamier than Heartknights, and excitedly describes the sequel's heroine, Aishira, and her incredibly romantic first meeting with the prince by the sea, leaving Tiara Rose utterly bewildered by the sudden outburst. After freeing herself from Akari's grip, Tiara Rose asks why she has come, though she is still curious to learn more about the sequel's heroine. Akari reminds her that it has been decided she will marry Prince Heartknights, but then reveals that she can use the power of the Holy Prayer, smirking as she suggests that if she tells Prince Aqua about this power, she could easily marry him instead, which makes Tiara Rose gasp. Tiara Rose considers that Prince Aqua must already know about Akari's power, recalling that when they spoke earlier, he only told her that Akari was now engaged to Heartknights and didn't mention anything else. She wonders if he was simply being considerate of her anxiety or if it's possible that he doesn't know the full story behind the engagement himself. Akari demands that Tiara Rose break up with Prince Aqua, arguing it should be easy since Tiara Rose has no emotional attachment to him from the sequel, unlike Akari who played his route over and over. Tiara Rose angrily clenches her fist, retorting that Akari is being ridiculous and completely ignoring Prince Aqua's own feelings, reminding her that he is a living, breathing person and not just a game character. Unfazed, Akari scoffs and asks if the cat has her tongue, confidently stating that since Prince Aqua is royalty and she possesses the Holy Prayer, it is only logical that they should marry for the good of his great country. Despite Akari's certainty, Tiara Rose stands her ground, her expression showing she has no intention of backing down. Tiara Rose points out Akari's existing engagement to Prince Heartknights, but Akari dismisses it as a decision made by the king that she has not yet agreed to. She reveals her plan is to inform Prince Aqua of her power, travel with him to Marine Forest under his protection, and then marry him, reaching her hand out towards Tiara Rose as she explains why she needs her out of the way. A strange feeling washes over Tiara Rose as a menacing magical energy begins to glow from Akari's outstretched hand. A powerful blast erupts towards her, filling the room with a loud boom and causing Tiara Rose to cry out in fright. The magical attack strikes Tiara Rose with a powerful jolt, and she finds herself completely paralyzed, unable to move her legs or summon her own defensive magic. She realizes with dread that the difference in their power is too great for her to protect herself, and Akari looks on with a cold and merciless expression. A cruel smile forms on Akari's face as she muses aloud that a story where Tiara Rose gets injured and her engagement is broken sounds rather appealing. Tiara Rose can only let out a small cry of fear as another wave of magic makes her flinch in pain. With her hand crackling with intense magical energy, Akari declares that as the story's heroine, she is destined to receive a happy ending and asks Tiara Rose to cooperate for their sakes. Tiara Rose glares back, knowing she cannot look away, while Akari chillingly reassures her that it will only hurt a little and she'll just fall into a coma for a few months for their happiness. Akari unleashes her final attack, shouting for lightning to strike forth as a massive blast of energy hurtles directly towards Tiara Rose, who lets out a desperate scream. Tiara Rose braces for the impact, but to her surprise, she remains completely unharmed. A glowing magical barrier has formed around her, perfectly deflecting Akari's attack. Confused, she looks around, knowing she is not capable of casting such a powerful shield and wondering who could have saved her. Suddenly, Prince Aqua is there, pulling her into a protective embrace and stating that he is glad he made it in time. Overwhelmed with shock and relief, Tiara Rose looks up into his eyes and whispers his name, noticing that his attendants have arrived with him. Prince Aqua's expression turns to one of pain as he notices a scratch on Tiara Rose's cheek, and he apologizes for not arriving sooner to prevent her from being hurt. With tears in her eyes, Tiara comforts him, insisting that he shouldn't be sad because he saved her from a much more serious injury. Clenching his fist in frustration, Aqua turns to a stunned Akari and demands an explanation, just as an attendant reports that they were warned Akari had teleported into Tiara's room. Realizing her plan has failed, Akari quickly tries to defend herself, telling the prince that he has it all wrong. Akari begins a desperate performance, claiming the power of the holy prayer has awakened within her and that she was nearly forced into an unwanted engagement. She begs Prince Aqua to save her and take her to his kingdom, but Marquis Clementil interrupts, calling her words nonsense while Akari tells him to be quiet. Akari continues her plea, offering her immense power to ensure his kingdom will prosper, and Tiara's heart pounds with anxiety, fearing he might choose Akari for this reason. Sensing her distress, Prince Aqua gently strokes Tiara's hair before turning to Akari and calmly revealing that he already knew about her power, leaving Akari speechless as Tiara clutches his coat, silently begging him not to leave her. After a moment of tense silence, Akari asks why he didn't make her his fiancée if he already knew about her power. Prince Aqua confirms that he is aware of her abilities but coolly informs her that he does not need the holy prayer to make his kingdom flourish and that she shouldn't underestimate him. Looking down at the stunned Akari, Prince Aqua delivers his final decision with unwavering certainty, stating that he does not need Lady Akari. Her face falls in utter shock, unable to process his words. He then turns his loving gaze to Tiara, declaring that he already has her and has no interest in any other woman. Akari trembles, unable to believe that her coveted power has been so easily dismissed. Prince Aqua then leans down and gently kisses Tiara's forehead, apologizing for being slow to come to her rescue. As he pulls back, Prince Aqua tells Tiara he's just glad that she is alright, while in the background, a defeated Akari collapses to her knees, muttering in disbelief that she wasn't chosen and questioning how it could be possible. Guards rush forward to seize the defeated Akari, placing a magic suppressor bracelet on her wrist as they lead her away. Prince Aqua holds Tiara close and explains to her that any benefit he might have gained from marrying Akari would never outweigh the cost of losing her. Prince Aqua gently checks Tiara for any other injuries, and she reassures him that she is fine because he saved her. He softly touches the graze on her cheek and insists on getting it treated immediately, causing Tiara to blush at his tenderness and feel flustered to be so cared for. He then scoops her up into a bridal carry, telling her that it's okay to be pampered after everything she has just been through. Tiara feels embarrassed but also incredibly happy, thinking to herself how kind he is. Held safely in his arms, Tiara reflects on how she has lived in constant fear, knowing that as the Villainess, she was fated for doom and that any selfish action might cause Prince Aqua to hate her. But now, as he carries her through a beautiful field of flowers, her mind is finally at ease because he has chosen her over Akari. She is brimming with a happiness so pure that she doesn't even know what kind of expression to make. In the kingdom of Lapis Lazuli, there is a vast lake where a white tower stands. This tower was built to confine members of the aristocracy, and its walls are designed to suppress magic, a place known only to a select few of the kingdom's most powerful citizens. Inside this tower, Lady Akari complains about her confinement, wondering why she must stay in such a place. She knows she should have received a harsher punishment for her actions, but thanks to her own holy prayer power and a request from Lady Tiara, her sentence was reduced to being held here. In a flashback, Tiara is seen speaking with her father and Prince Aqua, asking for leniency for Akari because she herself did not sustain any serious injuries. Tiara also felt grateful because Akari is the only other person who knows about the Otome game world and even shared the name of the sequel's heroine. Prince Aqua, standing by her side, agrees to her wishes. Back in the present, Akari laments her situation in the lonely tower, frustrated that Prince Aqua rejected her and Prince Heartknights seems to barely care about her. She feels lost, wondering how she ended up imprisoned when she is supposed to be the story's heroine. Due to a magic suppressor, her powers are limited to simple tricks like creating water or light, making it impossible to use her magic to teleport away. Akari understands that escaping the tower by herself is impossible, as the entrance has a special lock and knights are stationed everywhere to keep watch. She lets out a sigh, wishing a prince would come to her rescue just like in a real Otome game. Just as she thinks this, her expression brightens as she realizes Prince Heartknights himself has come to visit her. She happily welcomes him and offers to prepare his favorite black tea and cookies, but he tells her not to bother since he won't be staying for long. Akari insists, explaining she has so much free time that she doesn't know what else to do. Prince Heart Knights then informs her that it has been decided she will marry him to assist the second prince, Sirius, and she cannot object to this arrangement. He is surprised when she agrees so meekly, as he expected her to still be longing for Prince Aquasteed. Akari simply states that she understands, knowing he isn't there to rescue her from the tower. Prince Heart Knights assumes she is still heartbroken over Prince Aqua's rejection, and Akari admits that she does like Prince Aqua, saying it's the truth no matter how shameless it may seem. However, she then looks at Heart Knights and tells him he is mistaken about her feelings before confessing that she really likes him as well. Prince Heart Knights is stunned by her words, as he had always believed her heart belonged to someone else. He turns away with a tear in his eye, thinking she is a self-centered girl but feeling happy nonetheless. He decides to take his leave, much to Akari's surprise since he just arrived. As he walks away from the tower, Heart Knights thinks that if he had stayed any longer, he might have said something he shouldn't have. Meanwhile, the day has come for Tiero's departure to Marine Forest. She says a heartfelt goodbye to her parents, who tell her to take care and write to them if she needs anything. Tieros reassures them not to worry because she is now truly happy. She knows the journey to Marine Forest will take around 20 days and that she won't be able to return to visit for a year until the wedding reception. Her father formally entrusts her to Prince Aqua, who promises to treasure her and make her happy, adding that she already brings him immense joy. Tieros then shares a tearful hug with her mother, promising to bring back plenty of gifts when she returns. After teasing her own crying father, she boards the carriage. Her attendant, Philin, promises Tieros' father that she will support her properly, and with a final wave, the carriages set off. Inside the carriage, Tieros feels her heart pounding nervously as she finds herself alone with Prince Aqua. He breaks the silence, telling her that their journey to the town bordering Marine Forest will take about 6 days and that she should look out the window to enjoy the beautiful, changing scenery. Tieros mentions that she has heard Marine Forest has fairies, which are not found in her home kingdom of Lapis Lazuli. Prince Aqua confirms this, saying he is sure she will be blessed by them. It is said that fairies settled in Marine Forest because they took a liking to the beautiful country, and those they bless can receive gifts like new magical powers. Tieros is very excited to meet them, as her knowledge of Marine Forest is limited to what she's learned in her current life. As she looks out the window, Tieros thinks of her parents and feels truly blessed. Prince Aqua then gently holds her face and gives her a sweet kiss before asking if she is alright, to which she replies with a happy smile. He tells her she is far too cute and pulls her into a warm embrace. Suddenly, a bright light flashes inside the carriage, and a letter magically appears in the air, addressed to Lady Tieros. Tieros observes that the magic used to send it is very unique and requires great skill. Prince Aqua cautiously takes the letter, deeming it suspicious. Tieros worries it could be dangerous, but he reassures her before opening it. He discovers it is from Lady Akari and seems harmless. In the letter, Akari explains that her magic is now only strong enough to send letters from the tower. She writes that she will work hard to find happiness with Prince Heart Knights and wishes for Tieros to be happy as well. Tieros asks to keep the letter, and though Prince Aqua is surprised she wouldn't dislike something from Akari, he agrees. Tieros smiles, knowing the letter is Akari's unique way of encouraging her, for at the very bottom, written in Japanese, is a hidden message, telling her not to lose to the sequel's heroine. Tieros clutches the letter to her heart, telling Aqua she will use it for encouragement whenever she feels down, and she silently vows to herself that she will not lose. Far away, 2 mysterious figures watch as the prince returns, wondering about the girl he has brought with him.